And we are live. We are live with Guy Lane, and we're going to wait for people to join us. And I'm going to read a little thing that you have written, Guy, or start with something, and you can tell me if you wrote it. No, I'm sure you wrote it. Good evening from Australia.
Hello.
And unfortunately, it's going to take a while for people to join us because I am unable to share because Facebook likes to put me in jail. So hopefully those that join will be nice enough to share. And it is what it is. So you're here with me. Thanks. I'm
Right.
going to start out with this opener, and you'll listen here. Dangerous. Reinforcing climate feedback loops are already playing out. Carbon sinks are failing, and every wildfire that burns out of control adds more carbon to an already heated atmosphere. The only hope for human civilization is to quickly change, track, and partner with the natural living systems of this planet. To become stewards of the Earth system in order to maintain a safe operating space for humanity on our planet. For years now, I have been convinced, that sustainability can't be understood as an economic or even environmental issue, but more as a profound spiritual imbalance in humans who have been dazzled by consumerism and other phenomena to blind them to their role as component parts of a single living planet. Welcome, Guy Lane.
Thank you. It's funny when I hear these things read back to me, I'm like, wow, that's really good work. Who wrote that? But apparently it was me.
You did. And welcome
in...
welcome to everybody in the audience, because tonight I have to tell the audience that I am in Facebook jail, and so I can't be my own sharing committee. And we have really great audience, Guy, and really great followers. So I like to say hi to Lori and Steve. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Lori. Everybody's here. So just share it out, and Ed's here. This is going to be a good conversation because, guys, Guy is really cool, and he's from the other side of the world, and we're going to ask him I'm going to ask him a lot of questions. But the first thing I'm going to do is ask Guy, tell us about yourself.
Well, I like to tell that story by when I was in my 20s, I spent a couple of years in the oil industry and participating in a whole bunch of ecological rat baggery, including running an oil ship onto a coral reef and dropping tons of waste into the ocean. And that was really the beginning of my epiphanies, which is my ecological epiphanies, or environmental awakenings, if you like, which continue to this day. And so from there, I went and did an environmental science degree, got an honors in environmental policy and environmental economics, and I got interested in climate change really very early, long time before it was sort of popular. And then in 2000, I started working with climate change at a government program called the Greenhouse Challenge. I was a carbon auditor. And sort of that's really cemented my path in life, really since 2000. And then my father passed away on the day that the Kyoto Protocol came into effect. So I'd actually organised in Townsville a party in a nightclub where I'd raised like about $1,000 from local businesses to put money on the bar. We had there were 60 people turned up. We had politicians turn up. I invited all the councillors, the local politicians, local business leaders, but I wasn't there for the party, because I had to fly to the other side of Australia, to Perth, to be with my father, who passed away on the day that the Kyoto Protocol came into effect. So the Kyoto Protocol party, I never actually even saw a photograph of my own damn party, which is kind of annoying because nobody thought to take a photograph. So I've sort of been invested in climate change for a long time. And it was in 2017, the northern summer of 2017, I was in the UK with my family watching that string of hurricanes that struck America, and it just occurred to me that it's all shifted. And I started listening to Guy McPherson's work in 2013, in which I understood for the first time an alternative reading of the IPCC reports, if you like. And so I sort of, it was the first time I'd seen an alternative narrative about climate change, because climate change had always been projected to be some slow moving beast, that something as dopey as the United Nations could fix. And what that other narrative alerted me to was the fact that there was another reading of this, and that what was actually happening in the world was not consistent with the plans that were being put in place. So anyway, I'm sort of deeply into climate change, and it's what I do with my life. And I don't work regular jobs, so I do this as an activist. All of this is done as an activist, and so I haven't worked like a regular sort of position in climate change for some years now, and I don't know if I will, because I feel that I'm more effective doing this stuff as a freelancer than should I tie up with an organization that will then soak up most of my time.
You're probably right. And, you know, a lot of people are saying maybe we use the word earth advocate now instead of activist, because people that we are trying to talk to wake up, they hear the word activist and they think of hippies in the 1960s. And that's Heidi. If you're here with us, Heidi, we are, I'm a hippie too. I
don't have enough hair to be a hippie, so I'll be an earth advocate.
There you go.
It's
awesome. That's one of our followers, Heidi, who's awesome, and she's doing her own live streams tonight. So I want to go down to before we talk about current events. You have the most interesting material. You really do, and you go from science and spirituality, and you've written many books. Your sustainability. I wanted to talk about these scenarios that you talked about: drowning, imminent extinction, near drowning, most humans go extinct, and learning to swim. Because you talk about a spiritual awakening, and I'd like to go over that with you. How this fits in.
So that what you're reading from there is the book What Comes Next, and anyone can read that for free if they go on to guylane.com website and join the newsletter, and that just downloads. You can get that book. So that was really a short book that you can read in 2 hours. It was basically a summary of everything that I understood about sustainability and what needed to happen on the planet. And I wrote that in September last year. And as I was writing that book, I was reading a book about viral communication. So I made the book like short, so it's accessible. I made it really punchy, and I really just tried to summarize everything I could in a small amount of space. And one of the things that I've done is I don't take a position as to say I know what will happen in the future. And so what I did was I offered a spectrum of views, and so that's where drowning, near drowning, and learning to swim are the 3 scenarios for the future. So drowning scenario basically is an extinction scenario where we don't get hold of climate change properly. We slip into the hothouse, and basically the human race is wiped off this planet. I don't think that we're all dead in 10 years is a plausible scenario, but we're all dead by the end of the century or halfway through the next century. That seems not unfeasible under a hothouse scenario. Or the drowning scenario. So near drowning, which is another scenario, which is where we get into action to fight climate change and the destruction of the biosphere, and we get completely walloped, but we somehow manage to struggle through. If you imagine somebody who nearly drowned, they're up on the beach, they're gasping, and they're probably traumatized by the experience, but they're not dead. And then there's learning to swim, and learning to swim is about how do we, as a global civilization, not only stop hammering the planet, but actually start to work with the planet. And so some of the models that I refer to in the book is the work by Adam Frank, who's the astrophysicist, who says that there's probably hundreds of trillions of other civilizations in the universe, and probably all going through their own same Anthropocene shock. And as he models these things out, he says that the civilizations that survive are the ones that actually become that the civilizations partner with the natural biological systems of the planet. So here's a way of putting that. And this really is my vision for the future. And this is what I refer to as living into the long future, because we've got around 2 billion years on this planet before the sun gets too old and swells up and burns everything. So we've got the possibility of living on this planet for another 2 billion years. The question is whether we can avoid destroying the environment in the first instance. But let me give an example of how that might work. Naturally, there are large parts of the Earth, or in this instance the ocean, which are really largely devoid of life. So the open ocean is actually pretty much a desert because of the stratification. You end up with the nutrient-rich water is down deep, but the sunlit waters are at the top, and they don't mix. But if you can bring that water, some of that nutrient-rich water to the surface, you'll kick up a phytoplankton bloom, and that phytoplankton bloom will increase biodiversity where there previously wasn't any, as well as pulling carbon out of the atmosphere through the phytoplankton, and as well as putting up aerosols, which help to create clouds, which help to cool the planet. So here's a way in which humans can actively, knowing and understanding how the biological systems of the planet works, actually help to reinforce and nurture the natural systems. And so that's the vision of learning to swim, is that we actually start doing that. But right now, we have got the powerful people in the world behave like psychopaths. The most powerful corporations are chewing the planet up. And I've just come through a master of business. And so, in 4 or 2.5 years of full-time study, not once did anybody in a master of business refer to a carbon-constrained economy. It was all just how to market products and services to maximize shareholder return.
Insanity. It's last night's guest, Dr. Bougie. He's from Nigeria. I told you about you have to watch that with Antonio.
Yeah.
He nailed everything that's going on. You are going to just love it. You're saying exactly what he did.
Yeah. And look, so part of this is to think of, and let me explain how I come to this spiritual angle, if you like.
Yeah.
So in 2016, the Pope put out an encyclical, which is a letter or a teaching, if you like, from the Vatican, and it was called Laudato Si, and it's basically a rambling, Vatican document about how it's important that we protect nature and climate change is really important. And I thought, well, that's fantastic because the Pope's on board. He's really popular. He's got 2 billion followers.
Right.
Climate change is solved. So the next time I saw the Pope, some months later, he was beatifying somebody, and I'm like, well, hang on, what happened to the climate change project? So I went and looked at this document, and when I went to the Vatican website to find this document, it turns out that there was a whole bunch of other encyclicals, and on the links on the side, you could read all of the encyclicals from all the other popes. So rather than being some groundbreaking thing that now the Catholic Church was actually going to do something for the planet, it turns out that it was just an administrative thing, And so I thought what we actually need, what I realized was that mainstream religions are not going to save the planet. And in fact, in most instances, they're actually running interference on saving the planet, if only because they're deluding people into because they're having people think about God as opposed to think about ecosystems. So I reasoned that what we need to do, rather than trying to bring religions onto the sustainability journey, was to create a religion based on the sustainability journey. And so I wrote a paper, an article, and I put it up on LinkedIn. It was basically a 600-word article that outlined that argument. And I said, what we need to do is we need to create a religion based on Gaia. Gaia, of course, is the idea that all the living systems on the planet interact to help maintain conditions on the planet. I put that out on LinkedIn, and a couple of days later, I got invited to speak at an international event in Malaysia, and they were going to pay me to go over there and talk about this idea. And that was like, we'll go from writing an article to international invitation. I'm like, so there must be something in this. So rather than going over to Malaysia with an abstract concept, I started researching it and putting it together and trying to figure out what a religion based on sustainability would actually look like. And so I've been working on that since August 2016. So that's around 2 years.
Were you raised in? Did you say that? Were you raised in an organized religion background?
Nominally Church of England, but my family wasn't religious. I remember going to Sunday school and thinking it was stupid. And I remember I used to have religious education at school.
Appeal to a lot of people is the spiritual nature of these things, and it appeals to a wide variety of people. So, if you can speak to an audience that is receptive because of that spirituality, it's a good thing, because you're bringing the message in a different way that others are.
Yeah, and look, humans are spiritual animals. The human psyche is open and receptive to the spirituality concepts and when I'm saying spirituality, I'm referring to an understanding of things that can't be proven, and so the definition of religion, and this is one of the things I had to go through for this Perium project. In Australia, the Australian Taxation Department is the agency that determines whether you're a religion or not. So I just went and found their definition, and so I've based this religion for the planet based on the Australian government's definition, which is consistent with most of those. And a religion is a belief in a supernatural and the canons of conduct that give effect to that belief. Okay, so a supernatural is something that you can't prove. And so when I first started looking at this, thinking we should focus this around Gaia, well, I later realized that you can't really do that, because Gaia is actually a scientific theory, which means that it's not a supernatural. And so one of the things that I went through was, if Gaia theory says that all the living things on the planet behave in the manner of a single living organism, so I thought, well, what if all the living things on the planet are a single living organism? Now, if all the living things on the planet are a single organism, that means you and I are cells in a body, and it changes the way that we see the world.
Right.
But what it also means is it needs a species name, because if it's a single living organism, it needs to have a taxonomic classification. So I went through this thought process, and I came up with the name Imperium Vitae Planeta, right? So that's what's called a binomial. A binomial is basically the species and the genus name, but there's an argument. I'll send you the link to this. It outlines this argument. So Imperium, Imperium Vitae Planeta, or Imperium for short, then comes to be the name that I ascribe to a single living organism of which we are all component parts. We're all cells. And that is the supernatural, because it can't be proven, supernatural agent, if you like, that underpins the Perium religion. And the word Perium comes from the word Imperium, which comes from the name Imperium Vitae Planeta. And that name translates roughly to the empire of the living planet.
Is it taking off?
It's, you know what, it's actually I've got it to a point now where I think it's really well thought through, and I've got everything, the website's built, but it just hasn't been promoted. And in order to take something like this, for it to take off, it needs resources, and I don't have resources. Okay, so part of what I do with these things is I build them and I share them on the view that at some stage I'll find the right partners to help me kick them off.
Okay. Okay.
There's two aspects to it. One aspect is basically to market the hell out of it and share it and get people involved. And the other aspect is to actually incorporate it, to create it as an official recognized religion. And that is a whole process involved in that. And there's all sorts of traps for young players and pathways down that. So I'm looking at all of these different things, but in the first instance, I'm looking for people that can get behind, who've got the resources that can actually drive it to the next level.
I'm going to give you a comment. Rick Lefebvre, he says, religion may be a substitute for the tranquilizer or Valium to help people cope with life's reality by submersing in a cult. See, there's that other side, of people saying, well, religion, I myself am not a follower of anything, agnostic.
But let me just address like religion and cult. Okay, so cult is where
that's what's happening here. So do that.
Okay, so I'm not interested in being a cult leader, and that's not what this is about. And a cult leader is where an individual person is the source of this spiritual sort of guidance, if you like. That's not. If you look at the Perium website, perium.org, Perium. There is one small picture of me on the about page which says this is where it came from, but this is not about me. And the reason why I'm the one that's talking about it and doing the videos, and it's my face on the videos, is because I'm the only one who's actually driving this thing at the moment. Ideally, I'd have teams of people and professional presenters, because this is not about me, this is about the planet. This is about where I fit into this is I've thought through how to take the environmental sustainability crisis, what we need to do, and to convert that in the form called religion. That's all I've done. It's not about me. It's about creating something else.
Can you convert those in other religions that may be fed up with conventional religion, but who feel the need to have a belief? Why not?
So I thought that through in great detail because it's very important. And so there's a concept called multiple religious belonging. And it's not so common in Western countries, but in Eastern countries, in particular Japan and Asian countries, you'll find that people quite often actually have multiple religions. So you'll find that a lot of people might be Christians, but they're also Buddhists. And so what I've created in Perium is to write this thing in a way that doesn't interfere with other people's existing religious beliefs. Okay. So Christians can also believe in the Perium religion. And see, what's really important about Perium as well is it doesn't have a God. So most religions are based on this thing called a God. So there's no God in Perium. I don't claim that Imperium Vitae Planeta, the living planet, is God. It's simply a living organism that we're a component part of. You could say, yes, Imperium did create us in as much as we evolved through her processes, but it's not an abstracted concept like God. And so what happens when you've got a God, particularly one of these monotheistic gods, is you can't have another God, right? Because then how can you have two monotheistic gods? That makes sense. So the concept of Perium is basically it's open for multiple religious belonging. That Christians can be Perians, Muslims can be Perians, atheists can be Perians,
humans can be Periums.
Yeah, mermaids can be Periums. Mermaids.
Okay, well, does anybody have any? Lori had a good comment. She said, okay, but each of us cells in a worldwide living organism with all living things. I get it. We are all one. Well, in the long run, I mean, we all die and become dirt. But
in Perium, I talk about that. So the funerary rites, if you like, or the funerary processes for Periums would be to allow your body to go back into the natural cycle. Okay, so what we do now is we embalm people and put them in these big boxes and we put them in a grave, and you come back 20 years later and the dried up cadaver is still there. Well, what we need to do, we're sort of hosts of minerals, yeah? And so when this body dies and these minerals become inert, we need to put them back into the flux, as I call it, to allow other living things to have the benefits of those minerals. Yeah. So this is where you'd have cremation, or you'd have one of those natural burials where you're actually allowed to rot, to use a word.
Well, listen, okay, I think we did it. We've covered that pretty good. I want to segue. Would you mind?
Yeah, please.
Because we're going to segue because now we've talked about this. We talked about the earth. We've talked about the spirituality. We've talked about your Perium. But I'd like to talk about. Well, I'd like to ask you a question. I found that you had written about things. So, what is a sustainable go-getter? I mean, maybe we're jumping, but
okay. So,
sustainable go-getter. And what's your definition of sustainability? Let's go there now.
Sustainability is a process by which the humans get to live deep into the long future. Okay, sustainability is a way of humans behaving on this planet that allows them to live deep into the long future. Okay, and the long future is this concept of the billions of years that we have available to us. One of the things I've done the last few years, I've founded a non-profit, a registered charity called the Long Future Foundation. And the principal, it's an environmental and educational charity. And the principal motivation behind that was to actually share the concept of the long future, the concept that we could be on this planet for millions of years if we behaved accordingly. Because most of the conversations about sustainability in the past have been up to 2100, you know? And so if you actually ask people who are into sustainability, how long does sustainability last? Everyone will go, what sort of a question is that? But here's you got this concept called sustainability, but it's not forever. They say, oh yeah, forever. Well, it's not forever because we don't get forever on this planet because we've got a sun that's going to expand. And so there was this sort of lack of intellectual depth, if you like, around the concept of sustainability. And so that's where the long future came in. So when I write my books, I approach my books like entrepreneurs approach entrepreneurial ventures. Okay. So there's quite often pivots. So when I started writing What Comes Next, it was originally called What Comes Next. And then I had this brainwave to change the title to Blue Ocean Motion, which is where I did this piece to camera where I recited that poem, which is where you get the sustainable. So I became a sustainable go-getter. I'm laughing about it now. Anyway, so I put that out, and then everyone that knows me that said, "Oh, it's terrible, you should go back to the original title." So I went back to the original title, the book What Comes Next, which is available through the website guylane.com for free if you sign up to the newsletter.
Gotta get that in. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
See, I do my research. So there you go. You're a sustain. I did my research. All right. Well, then we're going to go to another thing, another bunch of concepts, because I found them very interesting, and that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Mitigation missions that you've named: refrain, sequester, chill, and negate. And I have the four. I have the four. What they mean, but well, you want to go for it? You want me to read what I have?
No, read it out. Read it out.
Okay. Refrain. Stop emitting greenhouse gases through a transition to a zero carbon economy. Sequester the excess CO2 from the atmosphere, something in the order of trillions of tons. Chill. Cool the overheated planet. And negate. Prevent the release of CO2 and methane from climate positive feedback loops. So I guess everybody would like that. And then I have another paragraph that you wrote, but this is basically what you said was, unfortunately, there's scant evidence of that happening yet.
Yeah. And so again, so what I find when I come into these different fields and start researching things, I often find that you get a lot of the same information spread across lots of different sources, and then you're sort of scratching around looking for some more depth. And sometimes it's sort of my job to actually add the depth and think it through in a little bit more detail. And that's sort of what I've done there with the concept of climate mitigation, was to say, look, we've actually got four separate aspects to this. If we're going to fix this climate problem, and also I'm not because I'm not beholden to a doomer view of the world, and because I'm disciplined enough not to just be hopium, but to actually go look for evidence of the possibility of the humans living into the long future. I can then sort of actually be quite free to sort of express these are the things that we need to do, even though it might seem almost impossible that we can actually do it. So those four mitigation missions, and particularly the last one, which is to somehow stop the positive feedback mechanisms taking place. These things haven't been thought through in the fullest of depth yet, because we don't yet have a global system that actually allows this sort of stuff to happen. We've still got a global system which is dominated by fossil fuel industries burning fossil fuels. We haven't even got to the point where we can sit down and put in the proper trillions of dollars worth of resources to actually fix the planet back to the way it was. But that number, a trillion tons, and this is sequestered. One of the things that we've got to do is to pull carbon out of the atmosphere that we've already put in there, and that's in the order of around 1 trillion tons, and that's numbers that come out of a group called Climate Restoration, who are talking about not just stopping climate change getting worse, but actually take the climate back to the condition it was before the Industrial Revolution, which is around 300 parts per million CO2. And in order to do that, we've got to stop emitting carbon, which means we've got to euthanize the fossil fuel industry as soon as possible, in a manner that doesn't disrupt economies and throw millions of people out of work. So we've got to have a proper transition. And if we're going to have that transition, it needs to be a global transition. And we need to be using these international agencies that we've got, such as the UNFCCC, IRENA, the United Nations bodies, and World Bank, and so forth. So this needs to be a global program. And one of the things we've got to do is we've got to pull 1 trillion tons of carbon out of the atmosphere. Now, we can only grow so much trees to do that. But again, we talk about this idea of using the ocean to actually boost biological processes in the ocean that can help to sequester some of that carbon, as well as technical means as well. So these are the things that we've got to do if we want to enjoy the future and what I call the birthright of the human family. We came onto this planet as something quite different to all of the other organisms. And one of the things that we have available to us is to be an organism that actually gets to live for hundreds of millions of years. through our wise planning and our stewardship of the whole Earth system. And so there's a model, there is a conceptual idea, and I underpin that conceptual idea with all the science. So I talk about Adam Frank's work, I talk about the planetary boundaries, I talk about Bruno Latour and Leder's work called Gaia 2.0. So Gaia 2.0 is where humans actually start engaging with the biophysical systems on this planet in order to make the place, keep the place sustainable and, you know, enduring and healthy. But what we've got at the moment is we've got a global political and economic system which is dominated by psychopaths, and they are destroying the planet. And there's a war going on.
Oh,
and there's a war going on.
Yeah. Have you watched the newest arrival on the Doomosphere, the Lord You Are a Dumbass? He's actually makes insanely, incredibly depthful videos on YouTube. And he's a whole series. I'll send you a link.
Yeah,
he's
great.
In Greece. He's in Greece and he's on a boat.
Okay,
and he's sailing and interesting as hell. I will tell you, I have come across the most interesting people. I'd like to put you all in a room together. It would be solving the entire world's problems. Some of them are right with us right now. Anyway, okay. So I didn't mean to interject, but that was where my head took me. You know, we could segue actually from what you were just talking about to the Earth advocacy and Extinction Rebellion and the current events that are happening, because I know you wanted to talk about that. And how does it segue? How does an organization like Extinction Rebellion, or even the Yellow Vests for that matter, how does that meld with Perium, with you, with your vision?
Well, so in 20 years that I have been professionally involved in climate change, the Extinction Rebellion is the only thing that I've seen that stands up and says, here is a potential pathway to fix this thing. So not the only thing. One of the big things we've got going is we've got the renewable energy is now just ridiculously cheap, and it just outcompetes fossil fuels pretty much everywhere on the planet. So that's huge, right? So if we didn't have that, it would be extremely much more difficult. But I'd always thought that when solar panels and wind farms and renewables was cheaper than fossil fuels, that there'd just be this natural transition of the economy. But I had underestimated how deeply the governments were committed to protecting the interests of fossil fuel interests. And so what you're seeing now is a situation where the renewables are cheaper. We know we've got to do this transition because the science is so abundantly clear. Governments are basically failing in their task. Governments are not fit for purpose in this regard. Okay, corporations can be said to actually be doing what they're supposed to do, which is to maximize shareholder value, because that's how the corporations act. The corporations law works. It tells us what they're supposed to do. So corporations are kind of doing what they're supposed to do. Governments are simply failing in their primary duty, which is to look after the interests of the public. And so along comes Roger Hallam and the other people behind the Extinction Rebellion. I use Roger Hallam's name most because he's the one that puts out most of the videos explaining how it all works. But what he said, he was a permaculture farmer and he for 20 years, and then he found that he couldn't grow crops outside anymore in the UK because the climate had changed, and he got rained on for 6 weeks. It killed his crops, and then he got overheated. And so he said, this is crazy. And so he said, we got to throw this system out. And he looked at the environmental movement and all of the established players and said, look, these guys aren't fit for purpose anymore because A to B marches don't do it anymore. A to B marches work when you've got a government system which is flexible and listens to the public's demands. But our governments don't. The governments don't give a hoot about the demands of the public around climate change because the tentacles of the fossil fuel industry and the system are so tightly bound into them that they can't change. And so he says, we actually need to have a rebellion. And so he goes and does a PhD and studies rebellions and finds that over the last 200 years, the non-violent rebellions succeed 54% of the time in changing the government, whereas violent rebellions only succeed around about 20% of the time. So straight away, it's obvious what you should do, which is you should create a framework for non-violent rebellion to change governments and or change the government's position around issues of climate change, and that's exactly what they've done. And it's so far, it's only like 5 days in, the Extinction Rebellion in London, which I refer to as the capital of the rebellion because that's where their organisation is, that's where it's most advanced. It is kicked off, and they've basically seized London's key traffic hotspots. For the last 4 days. There's been probably 500 or 600 people arrested, many of whom, because there's no room in the jails, got let go and they went straight back to the bridge.
Wow. They are hardy.
And they're dead serious. They're not this is not about having a party in the street and going home. This is about changing the government or changing the government's position.
There's been a little criticism. The criticism I read, and I'm not advocating, I'm just being the reporter of what I read, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was that they were a little bit with their jail and going to jail thing out of touch with the real victims of that whole system. You know, the systemic oppression of, indigenous and minorities and all the groups that have been in prison. So there was a bit of and I'll send you that one because I found it. I thought it was really interesting, but that's the only criticism I've read, except for people on Twitter saying things like, "Oh, they think that's great to make traffic stop. That's using all that gas." But I think they're making more of a mark, and people are. I mean, Yankee Stadium, they unfurled a big poster, that said that
it's going global. It's in Brisbane right now. So we've got there's a coal terminal in the city where I live, where trains are full of coal come down to load it on the ships. Well, that's all just stopped dead because the activists are now sitting on top of the trains. They had one guy that seized the train line the other day, and then he I don't know what happened to him because it's not a lot of information coming out of the organization, but he was doing live stream video from the top of this train. And there was this actually really fascinating situation. They sent this female police negotiator to talk him down. And this guy's 18 years old, and he's read up. He knows what's going on. And he say, "Well, I'm not coming down." And they bring this 4-wheel drive truck with a roof rack on it, and this woman is standing on the roof rack, right? And she's having a conversation with him, and she's been very polite, and she's just trying to negotiate and just saying, "Look, if you stay up here longer, the charge is going to get worse. I really feel for you," and yada yada yada. Anyway, but standing in front of her, kneeling. If you go onto my Facebook page, Perium, Perium, Facebook, you'll see this photograph because I posted it. And there's this guy who looks like Vin Diesel, who's dressed in all of the police like body armor. Okay, so he's got all the guns and toys, and he's like this bald head and sort of slightly dark skinned guy, and he's crouched down in front of this woman, almost like he's in this coiled spring, ready at a moment's notice to unleash violence on this 18-year-old boy who stopped the coal train. And I'm thinking, wow, what great theatrics. I mean, what an incredible thing. I mean, what's going through these people's minds where they get these ideas? But it's this bully boy, heavy-handed. No, I don't know. They probably got him down. I mean, I don't know why they didn't actually just get the Vin Diesel character to jump up onto the train and just grab him. So because I couldn't find enough information about how that moved. But the point is that this is a war. Okay, there is a war going on between the humans and the planet, and there are two camps of humans. There are humans that want to protect the environment, and there are the humans that want to do something that destroys the environment. And the battle lines are now being drawn between the humans that want to protect the environment and those people that want to continue this ecocidal global system. Now, to change this system, it's going to be huge. It's going to be hugely disruptive. It's going to get people to be pulling their hair out. There's going to be huge amounts of wealth lost that is held by the people who have got the most wealth. And that wealth has been ill-gotten because it's come through fossil fuels, agrochemistry, and all the rest of it. But it's got to this point now where the system isn't naturally changing. It needs to be forced. And so it's going to get brutal. It's going to get bloody. There's going to be a lot of people getting arrested. There's going to be a lot of...
You think the momentum is going to keep going? It's growing. It can't not. It can't not keep going. The United States, it's been peaceful from what I've seen, but we're not in our country. We're going fascist fast. So,
Yeah.
it was evidenced in Standing Rock. So I don't know. I just hope
Yeah.
and pray. Oh, hope, that word. I don't. Was making a joke. Hope and pray.
Yeah.
You ever see all
No.
that? Everybody says on Facebook,
Yeah.
"Oh, send hopes and prayers."
Yeah. Really helpful when there's been a gun match. Pray. Oh, great.
Let's
Change the
hope and
gun laws.
pray. Just like that'll stop the apocalypse.
Yeah.
But yeah, hey, here's a question. This just popped
Yeah.
in my head. What do you
Yeah.
think about the people? And I talked to somebody like this just this past weekend that say, well, we're going to be an apocalypse anyway. God's going to
Well,
make it happen.
we're not
So,
necessarily. Well, that's just
no, the religious people that say that.
I know, and that's what I say. Is a lot of
No.
mainstream religion is actually very anti saving the planet, right? And particularly that Pentecostalist belief around the rapture event. That basically,
Yeah.
I was in London. I repeat this story because it's still stuck in my head. I was on a business trip with my business partner, and we had a drink with her brother, who was a born again Christian, and I was talking about the Gulf of Mexico oil spill that was pumping 100 liters of crude oil a minute or a second or whatever it was into the Gulf of Mexico and potentially going to kill off the sperm whales in the Gulf of Mexico. And this guy says, "Oh, you shouldn't worry about that." I said, "Why not?" He says, "Because they're all going to burn anyway." And I'm like, "You're fucking kidding me?" And so I found that really offensive. And so what you've got now is one of the fastest growing religious bodies in Australia is actually these Pentecostalist churches. And there's lots and lots and lots of people who, seeking a way of expressing their spirituality, are getting soaked up in amongst this Pentecostalist belief, which is basically saying to them, "Hey, we're going to have an apocalypse. You guys don't worry about environmentalism. Don't worry about saving the planet. Don't worry about supporting the Extinction Rebellion."
Right.
Example. And so that is really destructive. And that's right here. That's in amongst us. That's in amongst developed Western countries. And then you look at something like ISIS, which is an extremist, ultra form of Islamic religion, who are deliberately trying to bring about the apocalypse. One of the documents I was reading was talking about ISIS's definition of victory. In order to battle your enemy, you need to know what they regard as victory. Because what ISIS was doing is it was seizing territory, holding the territory, governing the territory. Okay, right. So like waste collection services and all that, but then goading the superpowers to attack them. Didn't make any sense. Well, it did make sense when you realize that they were trying to bring about the Armageddon War, and because according to their prophecy, they needed to have the caliphate, and they would all get this reward caliphate. If they had the caliphate. And if to have a caliphate, you need to be governing the territory. But the prophecy also called for this war, so they were goading it, trying to bring it on. So religion, and this is the other point I wanted to make about religion, okay, is that when people hear the word religion, they often go, "Ugh, that's horrible." And I've struggled with this a lot. I've struggled with this a lot in trying to frame Perium, because, should I call it a religion even though it's designed as a religion? Well, here's the thing. A religion is a belief in a supernatural and the behaviours that give effect to that belief. So there's a football team in Australia called the Rabbitohs. I don't know much about the Rabbitohs or football in general, but they generally don't win a lot of games, right? They're not successful for winning games, but they've got this huge following, massive following. Okay, and so when there's a game on, all these people turn up and they wear the scarves, they've got the hats, they go and cheer, they take the big finger things and they pump things. And then they go to the pub and they get pissed. And if anybody comes in and says the Rabbitohs crap, they're going to get their head punched in. That's a religion, because it's a belief in something supernatural. They believe that the Rabbitohs are something bigger and greater than just another football team. And these are all of the behaviors that you perform if you hold that spiritual belief. So that's the thing about religion. Okay, we're all religious because we all have an attachment to spiritual ideals that we then put into practice in some way or another. Okay, so that's just to try and say, look, religion is something that we all do, right? Except that the mainstream religions are just so odious, particularly the pedophilia and their racism and their female, anti-female word, I can't remember. They're so odious. And so what we need to do is to create a beautiful religion that's based on protecting nature and helping the humans deal with what Adam Frank says all civilizations probably go through, which is the growing pains of being a civilization, because they probably all exploited fossil fuels and didn't know how to get off them. And that's where we are right now. So I have a great deal of empathy for human civilization. And I can see that battle lines have been drawn between the people that want to keep going with the system that's destroying nature and the people that are saying, sorry, we can't let you do that. And
Right.
so this is a very exciting time. And it is starting in London 5 days ago.
Listen, that's it is. I think at this point, I'm asking if anybody has any questions, because we've really come full circle. We really have. We started off talking about the spirituality and Perium, how you got there, and we went through your works, and now we segued back to this. So if anybody has any questions, I think we've covered a lot of good stuff. Lance says, no to American listeners like me. Pissed is not angry. It's drunk, inebriated.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I like that. That's cute. Okay. Yeah. And Lori says, sometimes angry goes with alcoholically pissed.
Well, yeah. You get really angry if you don't have any alcohol.
Oh, well, I got an echo all of a sudden. I heard myself. Does anybody else have any questions for Guy? Because I think we came full circle. We did well. We We covered a lot. Is there anything you would like to add? Oh wait, do you know Torstein, right? Torstein Vidal. You had to point out that also in America, a fag is not a cigarette. Everybody. Well, Lance says that you are right on about religion and the Pentecostals. It's everywhere.
I actually was one for a little while. So when I was 17, I got involved with a group called the Potter's House, which is a Pentecostalist Christian church. And so they, I was with them for about 10 months. And when I decided that, and I found a community. I mean, I went up to this town called Geraldton's. It was about 4 hours north of Perth, where I was living. It's a small fishing town. I did a technical training course in commercial fishing. And so I didn't really have a lot of friends up there, but I met these born-again Christians, which was this network and this community. And they were great, and they were fine. They were nice people. They were nice people. But what they believed was just weird and horrible. And when I told them that I wanted to leave to go back to Perth because I'd finished my training course, I had a situation where the pastor came to my house one day, and the assistant pastor, who was the pastor was an American guy, former tank driver from the Vietnam War, war veteran, big, burly guy, bit scary looking. And the assistant pastor was this young, handsome, athletic local guy that they had, who was also quite big and strong. I had these two guys come to my house, knock on the door. I opened the door. The assistant pastor steps into the hallway behind me, so they've sort of kettled me. And the pastor says, "Come on, guy, I'm going to take you into the kitchen." He said, "I'm going to put your hand on the gas stove to remind you of the torment of hell. Okay, you don't get to leave this church without the permission of the leadership, because God hasn't ordained it." And I'm like, what a bunch of fucking wankers. So I excuse my language, but so I guess what I'm saying is that, these people who hold those views, that's not going to help anybody, right? It's not going to help anybody. And so in creating Perium, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say, look, if you've got an interest in something that's got organization and structure and is a religion and fulfills that role, have a look at this model, because this model actually creates a pathway to get you deep into the long future, and it's based on humanist principles, environmental principles. And let me just say, so a religion has to have canons of conduct, behaviors. So what I've written as I've thought this through. So there's a daily observance, okay, called thanks plankton. So every day, just verbalize and say thanks to the biosphere. It's like saying thanks to the body of which you're a part, right? So thanks plankton. Also, one of the other funny things we do is you actually go and take hold of the tree, the leaves of a tree, and shake with a shrubbery, or say hi to a cloud. And so there's this little daily observance, which is a little sort of witty. It's witty and fun, but it's But it just sort of helps to, you know, keep you. It's a daily observance. It just keeps you in the forefront of your mind, right? So then there's a weekly observance.
The person you need to be, you know. But I mean, a lot of people do need to do those. I guess I don't want to sound crass. Repetition or spiritual exercises. So
Of course.
there you have one that is referenced to the earth, pegs to the earth, and will attract somebody that needs something. And it's all right. It's all right. Lance says Mother Earth. Mother Earth. I think that we did well. I want to do questions, and I think we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Lori, did you say, she said something about mainstream religions, but I'm going to put it up. I don't know exactly what she was referencing before. Let me look through and see. I don't know. Emily had said something about scary and fucked up, but I'm not sure what she was referencing. There's a lot of things that are. Lance had said, yep, Guy, completely understandable. Community is attractive. That's what it is. It's community. Humans seek community. And so, okay, now we have somebody. Kim said, has Joel Osteen ever donated?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Well, Guy, thank you very much for coming tonight.
Oh, you're welcome.
A really lovely discussion. And Guy has interviews that are on the web with the Natural Progressive and with the guys from the Reality Report. And he's got his own interviews on the Perium paid website. So we bring them out to expose everybody to all these different interesting people. And Guy, you're one of them. It's been like having you sitting in my living room and just having a conversation. And that's what we like. Emily says, thanks, Guy. So basically, thanks. And you wait, and everybody, good night. And thank you so much for coming. Everybody is thanking you. And it was because it was a lovely discussion. Good night, guys. And peace. As I always say, peace out. Peace out. Peace out. Peace out.